I wanted to make a comprehensive guide on how to aim train for the finals to improve your mechanics so that you can become the sweat lord that you were always meant to be. And outside of just locking in heavy and calling it a day, I wanted to give people methods to up their win rate and their mechanics, so let's actually talk about it. The first step is understanding the basics of proper aim. And unlike what you might have seen before, it isn't too complicated. The main ideas when training your aim are to focus your eyes on the target, unless it is extremely small, in which case you can focus your eyes on the crosshair a bit, keep a loose grip, and finally keep pushing the difficulty of your training as you improve. Other than that, just take care of yourself, like being active, drinking water, getting enough sleep, and just in general being more physically healthy. And that is all you really have to worry about whenever you're practicing your aim. And if you're somebody who's worried about your grip or your peripherals, I think you should find maybe a pro and try to get the peripherals that they use. And in terms of your grip, I don't think it matters all too much. The only thing you really want to focus on for having a good grip is that you have a full range of motion, and that means that you can move your fingers around while you're aiming. And that is really the main crux for a lot of different mouse grips. Basically, can you move your fingertips around in every direction to track people who are really far away? If you can, and it's comfortable, then you're probably going to have a decent mouse grip. Now, in terms of movement, it's important to practice moving and shooting, as this can severely throw off your aim, as you can probably imagine. There's a few styles of aim. We have counter strafing, where you move in the opposite direction as your opponent, mirror strafing, where you move in the same direction as your opponent, and AD spamming. The main thing to keep in mind is what you're trying to accomplish while moving in all these different ways. So I'll try to make a quick rundown for you to understand why and how you should strafe. First, we have counter strafing, which both forces your opponent to actively aim at you while not making it more difficult to aim for yourself. And it is also the go-to method for movement that a lot of different aimers will use, because it forces you and your opponent into an aim battle, which you've hopefully trained for. Also, when aiming at people who aren't looking at you, this movement type can keep you strafing and beaming people quite effectively, and it is kind of my go-to movement style as well. Mirror strafing is kind of the opposite. It makes the aim requirement for you and your opponent easier, as you really aren't moving your mouse at all to aim while mirror strafing. So while this movement style can be very useful if your aim isn't very good, you also give your opponent a lot of free shots in you as well. And as a result, you'll want to mirror strafe whenever you have a health point lead, as if both of you are absolutely shredding each other, you'll win simply because you have more HP. And this movement method is also great for finishing kills easily. So if somebody's very low, you can mirror strafe them to finish them off. And now we have AD spamming, which is useful in absolutely making your opponent scream whenever they take a duel against you. And the same way it makes it super hard for your opponent to hit you, it also makes it incredibly hard for you to land your shots as well. So in general, this movement type is specifically for 1v1ing people, and it requires the most skill, in my opinion, for aiming. I practice AD strafing while aiming a ton, as it is a common tactic whenever you're taking a close quarter aim duel, and because it's so difficult, it pays to practice your AD spamming and aiming at the same time. And for any of these aiming styles, you can add crouching, because it moves your headbox around whenever you're fighting a headshot weapon like a hand cannon or a sniper. And you can also add jumping, but jumping, unlike crouching, makes your hitbox incredibly predictable to track, because while you're jumping, you can change direction, and thus you're very predictable and easy to land. So I don't recommend jumping all too often unless you're doing something like a jump peek against a headshot weapon. And now we can actually talk about aim training in our free aim trainer, the Overwatch 2 custom game mode. We'll talk about actual aim trainers later, like Kovaaks, but for right now, because Overwatch 2 is free, I think it is a very good way to warm up your aim. And the 3 custom game modes that many Overwatch players will use are going to be the codes on the following. And don't worry, I will show where to put the codes in to actually download the custom game mode for you to play. And each of these game modes has unique properties that are going to help you improve your aim, and I'll go through how to use each custom game mode effectively for you guys as well. Now, first up, we have the Vaxta game mode, which is probably the best overall warm-up tool for Overwatch 2, because it has 4 different difficulties, modifications to strafe speed, and a number of different enemy hitbox sizes for you to experiment with. So if you're looking for a really good warm-up tool, this would probably be the game mode for you. And also on screen, I'm going to show you all the settings that I use to make this even more useful for warming up on the screen here right now. And in general, whenever you boot up Vaxta, you want to put the difficulty on easy and practice standing still and shooting the targets. And the main characters that I use for practicing my aim are going to be Soldier 76 and Cassidy, as they provide the most identical aiming styles to other FPS. And keep a loose grip while tracking like I talked about earlier, and try to keep your eyes on the target. And slowly but surely, as you get acclimated to smooth tracking, start adding the strafing methods I talked about earlier, which are going to be counter strafing, mirror strafing, and AD spamming. After around 15 to 30 minutes of smooth tracking, you can bump up the difficulty to hard or medium and practice all the different strafing styles versus different targets that are strafing unpredictably. And in general, as you're practicing, you're going to want to go for headshots, as one, it is a very common thing to go for whenever you're playing FPS, as you deal more damage when you go for headshots, but it also is a smaller target and will make your tracking a bit harder and more difficult. And also, for additional training, try to position yourself in a corner of the map. That way all the targets appear smaller for you, and it's going to force you to aim with your fingertips. And after another 15 to 30 minutes, try switching to Cassidy or Soldier, depending on which one you started with originally, because now you're going to be practicing either your tracking or dynamic clicking. That way your overall training is well-rounded. Additionally, something very important is to practice purposefully aiming off your target and then flicking to them before tracking them, as whenever you flick, you're going to have a little bit of tension, and it is very crucial that you learn how to release the tension in your hand after a flick to then start smoothly tracking things. And whenever you might notice that you flick somebody and then you have a hard time tracking them, a lot of the time it is because you haven't learned to release some of that tension in your wrist whenever you're tracking after a flick. And at this point, you can probably call it for your practice or your warm-up. However, there is going to be one crucial aiming style missing, and that is going to be vertical tracking. And that's where the custom game mode with the code on screen now is very useful. Once you boot it up, you're going to go through the start door and start smoothly tracking the bots while standing still. I like to play Soldier whenever I do this, by the way. If you can't track the small targets very well, practice aiming at the bigger characters until you get really good. Also, as you start improving and as you get more acclimated to vertical tracking, start adding in the 3 different movement styles that I talked about earlier. That way you're also training your movement and aim at the same time. And lastly, we have another custom game mode, and that is going to be the code on the screen here, which is when you really want to push yourself. Basically, the more targets you kill, the faster the targets are going to move until you get to a point where you can't physically track the target anymore. So as you can imagine, this game mode is really good for your reactive tracking, but can also be quite stressful, so it is very important not to tense up your wrist or your arm too much. Instead, try to keep a relatively loose grip and keep your eyes on the target while you're aiming. And while you're doing that, try to incorporate the 3 different movement styles again. That way you're practicing your movement and your aim in under stressful conditions. Now we can talk about aim training in an actual aim trainer like Kovaaks. The main idea for my playlist is to try to take clips from the game and try to add scenarios into my playlist that tackle the different aiming styles required for the game. Also, I wanted to add 3 different difficulties for people who have different aiming skill levels. That way you don't feel left out, or maybe the playlist will be too hard or too easy if I made one playlist. So I have the Novice playlist, which will be useful for anybody who is going to be new to FPS games or at least struggle with aiming in general for the finals. And we have also the Intermediate playlist, which is for people who either don't aim train but are very good at FPS, or for people who aim train a little bit or a moderate amount and are pretty good at aim in general. So people who probably are about above average in terms of aim. And the final playlist is the advanced one, and it is for people who either aim train a crap load and you're very good at aim through that, or you are very good at aiming just because you played like 10,000 hours of a particular FPS game. And as you can imagine, it's for people who have very strong aim. However, just because the advanced playlist in general is going to be for people who are very advanced, I do think you should experiment with playing advanced, because I think you'll get the most bang for your buck from that playlist over the other ones, at least in my opinion. And now I'm going to be showing a correlation between some of these scenarios that I picked in Kovaaks and the type of aiming you're going to need in the game, using some of the clips I got from the finals and then showing the Kovaaks routines in comparison.
Careful, it's a full team thing.
Alright guys, that is going to be it for this video. I hope that this video helped you improve your aim, or at least gave you the tools that you're going to need in order to improve your aim over at least a good amount of time. I'm going to be making more WoW videos, probably more aiming videos as well, but if you did like the video, please remember to like and subscribe, as it'll help me out a lot. But anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm out.